Canada, welcome back to another edition of the Canadian Citizen Journal. I'm your host, alias Tagai. Well, I'm going to call today's episode The Good, the Bad, the Stupid, and the Ugly, because that's pretty much exactly what's going on right now. So let us start off with the good. Here's the good. Information Commissioner got back and says CBC has to release withheld records. I'm going to read a little bit of it. Canadian Information Commissioner Carolyn Menard has ruled that the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, CBC, propaganda arm, a publicly funded broadcaster, improperly withheld information and obstructed independent journalism. The ruling comes after CBC refused to release communications between its employees and Twitter, now X, dating back to 2018, despite being required to provide access under federal transparency laws. Well, we know how transparent our federal government is, so that's why they get away with what they do. But thank God somebody actually did the right thing. It doesn't happen much in Canada anymore, but kudos to Carolyn Menard. So that's a good thing. And by the way, I said in a previous episode, they've launched another complaint, and it's against the Liberals, especially Mark Carney, on their control of media and not allowing independent journals to actually report or be part of the process of asking questions and showing what's going on in these Liberal rallies. Well, call them a rally. They're like 20 people. They gather them all in together, CBC and them. Everybody get together. We're going to start the cameras. We want it to look like there's thousands of people here. It's all bullshit. These people are they're crooks. They're liars. They're fascists. And I read the definitions off on a previous episode. Hit the dictionary, look it up. You will see I am absolutely right. Now for the bad news. Bad news. The courts found and sided on prorogation with the Trudeau government. Now, there is a program I bring up often on my show. They are called Northern Perspective. I urge you to look them up and give them a watch. I pretty much guarantee that if you are into politics and are inquisitive in any which way, you will want to subscribe and end up sharing them. They break down the political sphere and what's going on in Canada incredibly well. This is a couple. They've given up their careers to take this on, kind of like what I'm doing right now, in order to get the truth out. They broke it down. I was just finishing reading it. Pages and pages. Crazy how long this it was crazy. The amount of paragraphs. What they got out of it is pretty much identical to what I got out of it. I disagree a little wee bit. But here's the gist of it. I'm going to give you the short version. If you want the long version, tune into them because, like I said, they're great at their job. The reason the judge sided with Trudeau is because he is a appointed judge from Stephen Harper. And in doing so would look like his decision was biased. But what he did do, which is incredibly rare for a judge, is he left it open in many different instances to be appealed because he believes, this is the way I take it, that Justin was way out of line and should not have done it. So in other words, he's a chicken shit because the way our system is set up. I say this all the time. The law and judicial system should not be appointed by the government. They should be completely independent. Completely. Now you might say, well, alias, how do you do that? It's really simple. It was simple 100 years ago. It's even easier today with technology. If a judge has any affiliation with a political party, you pull them from the bench. Period. If they go to a rally, if they support them in any way. Period. Lose your job. Disbarred. Gone. Not disbarred. You can still be a lawyer. Go ahead, be a lawyer for them. Go ahead, be a lawyer for the fascists. That's fine. But you should not be a judge. If the judge puts everybody in jail, innocent or not, and you find out that he does, bad judge. If the judge doesn't put anybody in jail and got people being murdered and repeat offenders, bad judge. But if you have a judge who meets the middle and has a very good record of being able to decipher what is in front of them and come up with a fair decision, that is a good judge. And the system should work that when somebody retires up the food chain, higher up court, the next position is filled by whoever is highest on that list. Very simple. And guess what? Policing, the exact same. I'll be damned. It's that simple. Wow. Things we have to change in Canada. So this was the Justice Center Constitution. I was going to play a little clip, but you know what? He's actually not in the country. And in this video, he actually hasn't had time to break it down. So that's why I'm saying go to Northern Perspective. They break it down, and he'll be on Northern Perspective. They interview. Honest people are interviewed on their show all the time because they have nothing to hide. They're honest, and they're not afraid of being asked serious hardball questions. So once again, Northern Perspective, go watch them. I guarantee you're going to subscribe, follow, and probably share. Moving on. Want to play this clip for you? Danielle Smith, way to go. Listen carefully. She just smashes Vashey. It's awesome.
This over the last few months. It's around, what we do beyond counter tariffs, and in particular around energy exports. I've asked a number of federal ministers, what they're prepared to do, because clearly you would not provide your consent for that, and neither would Scott Moe. They have never unequivocally said that they would proceed without that consent, just that they would not want one region to unfairly shoulder the burden, essentially, of our response. If the federal government can compensate Albertans, for example, for whatever losses they end up taking, should that be the route they decide to pursue? Why is that not satisfactory for you? Like, why doesn't that add up? Because I think to a lot of Canadians that would be one way out of it.
Well, I noticed Ontario Premier Doug Ford didn't ask for a tariff on electricity. He imposed a surcharge himself so that he could receive the money, so that he could make sure it was directed to his people. And I must tell you, there's no circumstances under which I would acquiesce to a major tariff being put on Alberta Energy to go to Ottawa so Ottawa could decide how it's distributed. And quite frankly, the trust is gone with the federal government. They canceled pipelines. They've banned exports off the West Coast. They have put in a net zero power reg. They talked about an emissions cap. So if you think I'm going to believe that they'll take $40 billion out of our economy and just trust them, that it's going to come back, I don't. So no, it's not on. We're not going to agree to that. And nor should Ontarians and Quebecers want us to, because if the Americans retaliate by putting also restrictions on energy, it's Ontarians and Quebecers who are going to be harmed by that. 100% of the product that they get to heat their homes and run their cars comes from the United States. So just know that I'm acting in the interest of all of the country and saying that you don't want to play a war on energy.
Future Prime Minister of Canada. One of the best politicians we have in Canada. One of the most honest that I know of. I don't agree with everything she does, but she's my favorite out of everybody. She reminds me a lot of what Brad Wall was. And like Brad Wall, incredible. Like absolutely incredible. Some politicians, they say it as it is. They say it straight and they're not afraid to. The whole pulling the liquor off the shelves that she did, I'm not impressed. There's a lot of people, especially in Alberta, that are really pissed off at her for doing it because it's a socialist tactic, which we're going to get on right after this. We'll dive deeper in it. But listen to Vashey. Vashey is a reporter, not a journalist. And she may like to think that she's, nonpartisan. That's bullshit. If you watch her, she's not as bad. Like, she's definitely not no Rosie. Rosie is a complete lunatic liberal. 100% loony liberal. But Vashey, she's not, she has her biasms. And this kind of shows. She could be asking many other questions, but she likes to push the narrative.
Canada will be worse off for it.
But you've also talked at length about the degree to which that relationship on energy is interdependent. And in fact, that actually the U.S. benefits greatly from the discount that they're able to take through receiving oil from this country. So I understand, and I've put a lot of questions to federal ministers about all you laid out where the trust has been broken. But if a formal agreement is reached in which they promise every cent of that revenue will go back to Albertans to quote unquote, make them whole, why would you oppose that?
Well, because we've tried to get a renegotiation around equalization, because Alberta already pays $25 billion more into Confederation than we get back in benefits, and they flat out refuse. So I'm sorry, the trust is broken there. And I would say let's find a way to work on the things that we can agree on. And we've managed to get some great agreement at the table on the kind of goods that should be tariff because we can find alternatives to them. We're also acting in concert to make sure that we're buying locals to support Alberta and Canadian products, as well as to support the products with the countries we have free trade agreements with that are being honored. And so let's find areas that we can agree on rather than areas that we'll disagree on.
Even if it holds back our response, even if it holds back one of our biggest pieces of leverage.
Where does she get our from? This is what Canadians got to realize. You've allowed Canada to keep the foot on top of Saskatchewan and Alberta's heads, trying to drown us while sucking them dry. And all of a sudden now, oh, it's the best oil and gas, we're going to use it, this is ours. No, it's not. You've lost all privileges to even talk about oil and gas after what you've allowed to happen out east for the past 55 years. It's sickening. It's absolutely sickening.
Bashi, there's no circumstance under which I would agree to another tax on Alberta that takes $40 billion out of Alberta. You can ask me as much as you like. The answer is no.
Okay, I'll leave it.
I love it. Way to go, Danielle. Exactly. You can gas her all you want. She's tired of it. Like, you can even see her rolling her eyes. Like, for Christ's sake, you got 1,000 different questions you could be asking, and you just keep pushing this narrative, the liberal narrative. Like, I'm sorry. You guys lost. You have the rest of Canada shouldn't open their mouth ever again when it comes to energy products, especially within Saskatchewan and Alberta. You've lost all privileges by allowing, especially this last government, to manipulate the masses into thinking that it's this green thing. I'm going to tell all the greeners out there, I'm sure my audience already kind of agrees with half of what I say, or most of what I say, or they wouldn't be watching, but this you can share with all of your friends. Every day, Canadian resources don't get exported outside of our country. You are burning the planet. Yes, and funding wars to regimes who, guess what? We buy their products. How do you think Albertans and Saskatchewans feel knowing that Russian oil is still being imported? Did you know that? You didn't know that? One of these days I'll post a couple clips and show you how they sneak it in. There's a lot of blood oil that comes in. In fact, really, you could almost say 90% of the oil produced on Earth is blood oil, considering that it's coming from dictatorships and war machines. So, I'm sorry. The greenest thing you could do is unleash the energy, the resources of Canada, and get this green crap, bull crap lies out of here and start producing. It's going to help everybody. Everybody will benefit. Everybody will benefit. Now we're going to move on to the liquor. This is the stupid part of my episode. And I mean, this whole removing liquor, you'll see by the end of this, you'll see by the time I'm done, how absolutely redundant and silly the whole thing is. You're being gaslit, people. You're being gaslit.
It's a political stunt. That's all it is. No, there's nothing. In fact, it's imposing more costs, as you say, on the LCBO, and ultimately the LCBO we all pay for in overpriced booze, and we pay.
Yes, overpriced booze. I can go and buy a 60-pounder of Canadian-made whiskey down in the States from $16 to $21. In Canada, it's $54 to over $70. All taxes.
Way more than we should for booze, because half of the price is usually tax, right? Yeah. On anything you buy at the LCBO. So yeah, no, it's pure politics. It's virtue signaling in the extreme, and also, will it do anything? I don't think so. People keep.
No, it won't. Now the media keeps pushing this little interview that they did with the CEO of Jack Daniels. Now, they capitulate the entire argument around everything except for the singular point that he makes out. That is actually the entire truth of the interview. Now, I'm not going to play the whole clips. I found this little short, which is perfect. Listen carefully.
Canada's provinces have now said no to American alcohol. But the maker of Jack Daniels is calling the Canadian response disproportionate, saying it's worse than a tariff because it's literally taking your sales away, completely removing products from the shelves.
It's socialist. Canadians should have the choice to buy it or not. If you don't think the government is right and should be tariffed and that your government is corrupt and we need an election and all the rest of that, you should be able to go out and buy a bottle of American liquor. If you are, part of the team, then don't buy the liquor. It's really simple. It's called freedom. This is socialism. But now listen very carefully to what the CEO says.
Despite protesting the removal, the company's CEO says they can take the hit because Canada represents just 1% of its total sales.
1%. 1%. The state of Texas drinks more liquor than all of Canada. Yeah. And Canada's got a drinking problem. Canada has got a huge drinking problem. How big of a drinking problem? A huge drinking problem. Did you know that Canadians drink more alcohol than the global average? Yes. Now, I'm not even going to go through most of this article because Maclean's is a liberal propaganda machine. Yeah, sorry, but they are. Lots of fake news. Lots. Countries that drink lots of liquor are countries where their people are oppressed. They suffer anxiety and depression. The larger amount of drugs and alcohol used is significantly proven to be parallel with the type of system that governs them. This is a fact, people. A fact. The more socialist our government becomes, the less freedoms we have, the more taxes they take, the more we drink, and the more drugs we take. That is why it is an epidemic in Canada in the last 8 years. Our drinking average went from a fairly constant to a ski lift. Straight up. And don't be saying, well, it was COVID. There is, if you look at the charts. COVID, boom, drink lots. And by the way, during COVID, liquor stores stayed open. I wonder why. I wonder why they were always talking liquor and liquor and liquor. And you can go and get a drink and you can go and get that. And don't worry, you can get free drugs from these sites too and go and inject. Definitely. Why do you think the government pushes it so much? Why do you think interprovincial trade deals so much on liquor? Because if not, the people would be out on the streets actually trying to get this government out of power and cleaning up where we are. But a passive, drunk, stoned people just sit and drink and smoke their sorrows away. Now we're going to go with interprovincial trade. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you interprovincial trade.
The federal government and most premiers say they've reached a deal making it easier for alcohol to move from coast to coast. Booze businesses will be able to sell directly to customers in other provinces in an effort to reduce trade barriers in this country. But as CTV's Jeff Keel shows you, local brewers say it doesn't hit the spot.
A plan to help alcohol flow smoother between provinces might not be the silver bullet Manitoba brewers were hoping for.
This is the first step to begin to liberalize trade in alcohol across Canada. That's great, but this is not sufficient.
In response,
Okay. He says a nice quote later on in there. We sell flats. Our profit is off of flats. Flats meaning great big bulk sales of liquor, not in selling a 6-pack in a store in a neighboring province, or allowing somebody to drive across the border and buy a dozen beer or a bottle of wine and drive back again. They need to move product. This whole interprovincial trade is actually illegal. And it has been since 1867. And now I'm going to show you. Here's the proof. And I'd read the whole Constitution. I suggest those of you out there, you should look back and read this. I've read it many times. It's imperative to understand where the birth of the nation came from and the idea that they had for the Dominion of Canada. The actual idea that we were supposed to have an incredibly, we were supposed to be considered one nation as opposed to individual states, kind of like how the States is. That was the idea of Canada, is it was one big, loving, large, communicable, big hugging, all together. And they've destroyed that from us by allowing themselves to manipulate the law with legalese and judges with setting precedent. Here is the actual law. Section 121. All articles of the growth, produce, or manufacture of any one of the provinces shall, from and after the Union, be admitted free into each of the other provinces. Now, when they made this, back in the day, they had free trade between the U.S., actual free trade between the U.S. and Britain, and of course, any of the other Commonwealth nations. Free trade. No tax, no tariff. But when they were actually getting ready and designing the Constitution, they realized that geopolitics could change. These people had foresight and hindsight. So they said, as opposed to making it a law that we will always have free trade with these nations, because who knows what's going to happen in the future, let's just enshrine the Constitution to deal with Canada and its sovereignty and the freedoms of the people within, which is what their job is the citizens. That's they were elected by the citizens. They're there to represent the citizens. Let's deal with that. So they actually put this into law. And they didn't talk about anything overseas. Let that all change with geopolitics. The federal governments will have to deal with that as time goes on. But as a nation, they knew that if you allowed provinces to put up barriers, you would cause division. They didn't want that. And guess where we are today? It's easier to trade down in the States than it is from province to province. This is what leads the road to socialism and fascism. And the most obvious part is it leads in the separation from the rich and the poor. How? Well, if you're a small entrepreneur and you start a company up in, I don't know, Yoko in northern Saskatchewan or Newfoundland or wherever, and you come up with a brilliant idea and you start manufacturing it and you start selling it, and you can't sell it to the province next to you without paying huge costs, it gives your business away. Next thing you know, that person in the next province will change one little wee thing and start producing their own, and you're put out of business because your province only has 1.5 million people, and the next door province that didn't let you in has 7 million people. This is how you get people like the milk cartels. Hey, see how that came right up, the socialist milk cartels. Well, why should any farmer be allowed to, if I'm feeding that cow, and I can't drink all the milk, instead of pouring it down the drain, I should be able to sell it. Not in Canada. No, you got to get a license. And you can't just get a license. You have to apply, and you have to wait until one becomes available, and then you get the license. And if you go online, you will find many videos of people who are part of this process who are sick of it because they dump thousands upon hundreds of thousands of liters of very good milk down the drain because they're producing more than their quota allows. But they need to have that production because a cow doesn't milk the same all year round. There are spikes and lows. Welcome to socialism, people. This is your charter. This is why I say the 1982 Constitution and the Charter of Rights that came with the dictator and first socialist leader put into power by your media and the Laurentian elite should all be destroyed. And I know you're going to say, aliens, that's the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It sounds so great, but geez, how many people were trampled by horses for just trying to protest their freedoms and rights? Oh, Goodbye Charter of Rights and Freedoms, correct? Oh, they do it all the time. Do you remember the COVID? How many people were forced to take a vaccine? Oh, they didn't force them. Oh no, they're going to lose their job. They can't go out and eat. They can't go to school. They can't do anything unless they get it. That's called forced. I don't care how you look at it. It's forced. The government forced you to. Where's the Charter of Rights and Freedoms? Where was the law? Where was our judicial system? Well, it's moot. It's moot. It don't count anymore because it's done. Welcome to socialism. We don't have a democracy here anymore. We haven't had a democracy since 1980. Gone. And even before then, it's debatable. It's debatable. So, the whole Trump thing, everybody's all mad at Trump. He's been asking, very politely, to negotiate. He wants to talk. Trudeau won't talk to him. Why? Well, first of all, Trudeau has an IQ of 86. He's dumber than a sack of nails. Second of all, he is really disliked because Americans like their freedom. Americans like their freedom. And they don't like socialists. And they all know that them up there Canadians, they're gone damn fascists because we are on the road to fascism. They completely despise our government. And our government is not telling the people the truth. And they see that. Look what's going on down there and how they're exposing how even the media was getting paid by the Democratic Party to push a narrative. And now they're chasing the money trail. And where's that money trail going? To Soros. Oh, to the WEF. Oh. These evil bastards who are trying to destroy democracies. Now, I want you to listen very carefully. This is what they know down in the States. And this is why I need you to like, share, and subscribe so that you can get this type of information out to the people. This is Canada.
How many, to the RCMP, how many people do you estimate are involved in the production and distribution of fentanyl in Canada? Do you have like a ballpark estimate? Is it 1,000 people? Is it 10,000 people?
I don't have a ballpark figure on it.
So you have no idea how many people could possibly be involved in the fentanyl trade in Canada?
There's a significant group, a significant number of organized crime group, but if you're asking me for a specific number, I can't give you a specific number.
This guy lost all credibility. He's been proven that he was protecting the government, by the way, especially with that whole exposure that went on thanks to Sam Cooper and a whole bunch of other journalists. Trudeau is hopefully going to get charged here. I like to see him go to jail, but I also want to see these guys lose their stripes, be pulled out of the service, and be held accountable. The court should have to deal with these guys as well because they purposely hid information. They purposely stalled. Everything about these appointees disgusts me. These people should never be allowed to be in the force again. They should have their pensions pulled. They should be forced to go shovel shit in ditches because of what they have done. Especially India. Do you remember that whole bullshit affair that went through? That's probably going to get Canada kicked out of the Five Eyes. Yeah, right here. Goofballs. These liars, right here. But listen, he gets questioned good enough that he has to answer. And he gives hypothetical, but at least the number's fairly accurate.
How many organized crime groups are involved?
Over 4,000 organized crime groups in Canada, as assessed by the Criminal Intelligence Service Canada.
4,000 individual organized crime groups, all with their own distinct leadership and membership?
That's correct.
4,000 cartels. 4,000 distributors separate from each other. They probably deal or buy from the same people. That would be China, remember? The guys that's infiltrated our government? Those guys. Yeah. 4,000 of them. It is crazy, people. This is what Trump and the US wants us to fix. We are a global shipper of drugs. Doesn't that disgust people? Like, I don't understand the simplicity of people who like, oh, we're not that bad. It's only 48 pounds that the government is talking about. We're talking tonnage. We're bringing it in by the tonnage through the coasts, especially the port in BC. It's out of control. Moving on to the ugly. This is going on in Syria. Now, our government likes to say, it's the new government trying to rid the horrible Assad government. I'm going to tell you who the new government is. Fact. They are ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas. That's who the narrative that they're trying to push is the new good government. They push that bad evil, that Bashir out. He's an evil man. You know what Bashir did? He held these people accountable. The largest celebration in Christmas, multi-ethnical Christmas, was held in Damascus, Syria. It was 4 years ago, I believe. Christians, Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, all of them celebrating together on the streets. No deaths, nothing. Media didn't talk about it. Media didn't tell anybody about it. The right places, the right channels, especially if you know people who have been through that country, where that country helped them to get out and to safety into our nation, you would understand this. I know such people. So I have a completely different outlook. Why? I do lots of research. I'm not afraid to ask questions. And I don't hate anybody. I love everybody. But if you hurt somebody or you actually have issues, I'm going to call you out on it. I'm not afraid to. I'm not afraid to. That's why I'm here. That's why I do this channel. Now, ISIS, the new government in Syria, is creating genocide. If you have a weak stomach, you can turn away now. Now, this video was posted by a guy by the name of Gad Sad. This man is brilliant. He has more followers than all the media, bought and paid or not bought and paid, in Canada. Millions upon millions of people. Why? He speaks truth to power. He is honest as the day is long, but he's also brilliant. I suggest you follow him. I guarantee if you watch some of his videos, you're going to want to like, share, and subscribe. Now, 70 people were killed in this. And you notice I say people. Men, women, and all of their children were executed. An hour before I put this video, the number was at 170 innocent men, women, and children. This is ISIS. They now have a new country. This is going to get out of control again, just like Obama allowed them to. This is what governments do. Trump has hinted at this already 3 or 4 times throughout the last month and a half, 2 months. Doge is showing that there is major amount of funding coming from the U.S. into these regimes in order to create fear, hate, and division. We are going to watch murder and genocide explode in Syria if somebody doesn't get on this. And I have it. Kind of an inside grasp that I have a feeling there's going to be some missiles flying and military moving in there soon. Because genocide is not a good thing. I don't care who you're genociding. It is wrong. Hold people accountable with the law. They need their due process. You don't just shoot innocent people. And ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Hamas are all animals. All of them. Now, last but not least, these are going viral all across every social media. And I'm loving it. And this started because some really silly people, anti-patriotic people, started booing at hockey games and basketball games. And the most un-Canadian thing you can do. Actually, I would just say unpatriotic. I don't care where you're from. Mexico, Italy, France, Canada, United States. I don't care. You do not boo somebody's flag or national anthem. If it wasn't for them, you would all be raising your arm at a 45 degree and in German saying Heil Hitler. These people saved millions of lives and ensured the freedom you have today. Albeit in Canada, we don't have a lot left, but same thing said, our military is almost non-existent. Well, I like to say this to anybody who boos at hockey games. When you're in Vancouver and your Canucks are sitting there and they start singing the national anthem and you start booing the American anthem, how many players on that hockey team are from the States? How many Oilers? How many Toronto Maple Leafs? How many? Lots. You're degrading your own team. Your own team. Doesn't matter what sport you go into, right across the board, it is a melting pot of countries and ethnicities. And you are booing their home country. You are booing the servicemen who died beside our own servicemen for your rights and freedoms. Please, please, stop embarrassing Canada. Please, take a couple steps back, get your head out of the Liberals' propaganda machine, and get your pride back. I'd sure like to see Canada back where it was 10 years ago. It's almost gone at these sporting events, and it's disgusting. It's disgusting. So make sure you share with your friends that little piece of just straight honesty. How many Canadians are on that American team? How many Americans are on that Canadian team? Tell them to grow up. Move on, people. Move on. It's not Trump's fault, and it sure in hell is not the players' fault that Canada's in the position it is today. It's our fault. It is actually the center province's fault and the propaganda arm of the government called the media. It's their fault for gaslighting and lying to so many Canadians that they voted such an evil, dumb man into power. I guess he's a Zionist now. I guess he's a Zionist. I don't know. He's got like Hamas guys that he brought in, but he's a Zionist. I don't know. And is he still crying from the first time he was crying, or is this a new crying? I can't quite figure that out. He's just a sopping wet mess of stupidity. But anyways, I'm going to call that an episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. And if you are, punch that notification bell so you don't miss any future episodes. Until next time, you've been watching the Canadian Citizen Journal. I'm your host, alias Tagai.